Welcome to Even Tacos Fall Apart, a podcast with real stories, real struggles, and real hope. I'm MommaFoxFire, and today we are talking about the troubled teen industry. If you are not familiar with this world, consider yourself lucky. But if you are, you probably have some strong feelings about it, and you definitely should. Right now, in the United States, there are hundreds of facilities marketed as therapeutic programs for struggling teenagers. Wilderness therapy camps, residential treatment centers, therapeutic boarding schools. They have professional websites, glossy brochures, testimonials from grateful parents, and they charge anywhere from $10,000 to $15,000 per month. These places promise desperate parents that they can fix their troubled kid. Depression, anxiety, behavioral issues, substance abuse, whatever the problem is, they say they have the answer. Just send your teenager away for a few months or a year, and they'll come back transformed. But a lot of these programs operate with minimal oversight. Many states have shockingly lax regulations about who can run these facilities and what they are allowed to do. Some of these places use methods that would be considered abuse in any other context. Isolation, humiliation, physical restraints, forced labor, punishment disguised as therapy. And because they're often in remote locations and because they restrict contact with the outside world, kids in these programs have almost no way to speak up about what's happening to them. Parents are told if their kid complains, it's just manipulation. It's part of the problem they're here to fix. The industry has been around for decades. Survivors have been speaking out for years, but it keeps growing because it preys on something every parent fears: losing their child to mental illness or addiction or self-destruction. When you're terrified and you don't know what else to do, a program that promises certainty sounds pretty appealing, even if it costs a fortune, even if it means sending your kid away. The problem is that many of these programs don't actually help. They often make things worse. Kids come out with new trauma on top of whatever they went in with. Some never fully recover, and some don't make it out alive. That's not speculation. There have actually been deaths. There have been lawsuits. There have been investigations and exposés and documentaries. But the industry keeps growing because the demand is there and because the regulations aren't. Today's guest knows this world from the inside. Dr. Jentry is a survivor of the troubled teen industry. As a teenager, he was sent to one of these programs. He experienced firsthand what happens when profit gets prioritized over actual care. But instead of just trying to forget about it, Corey spent years studying how these systems work. He got a PhD from the London School of Economics. He worked as a consultant in the behavioral health industry. He saw the business side of it. And then he wrote a book called Selling Sanity that breaks down exactly how this industry operates and why it's allowed to keep harming kids. Corey connects his personal experience to the bigger systemic problems. He talks about why America's healthcare system is set up in a way that lets these facilities thrive. He explains the economic incentives that keep the cycle going. And he's honest about the fact that there are no easy answers. This conversation is important because a lot of families don't know these programs exist until they're in crisis. And by that point, they're vulnerable and scared and willing to believe anyone who says they can help. That's exactly when people make decisions they later regret. If you're a parent, or you work with teenagers, or you just care about how we treat struggling young people in this country, this episode is for you. We're going to get into what really happens in these programs, how they've managed to avoid accountability for so long, and what actual reform might look like. Corey's story is rough, but it's also a reminder that survivors can turn their pain into something that actually helps other people. Not in some sanitized, inspirational way, but in a real, gritty, get your hands dirty kind of way. So let's get into it. Here's my conversation with Dr. Jentry about the troubled teen industry, his personal journey, and why we need to pay attention to what's happening to kids beyond those glossy brochures. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Mental Health Monday here on Even Tacos Fall Apart. I am really excited for this conversation. Glad that you guys are here. It's the start of a new week, which is always something that can bring a lot of really good things, including good conversations. So, very happy to be joined today by Dr. Corey Jentry. Corey, thank you so much for taking the time out of your night.
Thanks so much, and thanks so much for having me here. It's a real pleasure.
Yeah, I'm excited to get into our conversation tonight. It's been a while since we talked about the troubled teen industry. And what we talked about, I believe last time when we talked about this, we talked specifically about wilderness therapy and the troubled teen industry. So we're going to
Mhm.
talk about it a little more broadly today, but Corey is a survivor of the troubled teen industry and the author of Selling Sanity: The Troubled Teen Industry, the Insane Profits, and the Kids Who Pay the Price. As a teenager, Corey was sent to one of these so-called therapeutic programs that promised healing but delivered manipulation, control, and abuse. He took the painful experience and turned it into purpose, earning a PhD from the London School of Economics, where he studied power structures, systemic violence, and conflict resolution. Now he's using both his lived experience and academic experience to expose how these programs operate, help families recognize red flags, and push for ethical, trauma informed care. We're going to talk about what really happens behind those glossy brochures and also how this industry has managed to thrive for so long and what real reform could look like. But Corey, I appreciate you joining us and just agreeing to share part of your story with us today.
Thanks so much for having me again. It's a real pleasure to be here, and always happy to share my story. And it was one of the reasons wrote my book.
Yeah, yeah. It's always interesting to hear kind of what inspired people to start sharing their story. And I want to get into that. Before we really dig in, though, I want to also share your website, a link to your book, and a link to your LinkedIn as well. So if you are looking to connect with Corey anywhere, you can find ways to do that in the chat right now. And if you have a question for us tonight, we have a question queue open. Feel free to pop your question into the chat and we'll address it while we are here. So, Corey, what did inspire you to start sharing your story and help others through your advocacy work?
Again, another great question, and I wish I had a very altruistic answer for it. A lot of people are like, "Oh, I felt inspired by this," or they wanted to share a story of resiliency. Mine was a series of just really being pissed off often by by what was going on in the industry. And unlike a lot of survivors, I don't know what this says about me. Probably that I'm just a glutton for punishment. But not a lot of people. Most people, when they get out of the those kind of environments, make it a point to never go back to those type of environments in one way or another. So, and that was very much my experience as well. As for a long time, it was just this kind of very strange part of my life that I decided that I was going to just mark it and be like, well, that let's hope that we never relive this again, and we'll just kind of move on. Unlike a lot of other survivors, I had the good fortune to move abroad for my education and everything. And I moved to Europe, and, I kind of joke with my fiance and friends and, all of that, all my European friends over there. Because whenever I would talk to them about my experience, if it would, ever come up or something like that, it was just seen as this kind of cultural nuance almost. They'd be like, oh, you're so American. That's such an American story. This would never happen in Germany, or it would never happen in Britain, or it would never happen here. And all of that is very true. It would never happen in any of those countries. But in an odd way, it kind of helped me move on from my story in a way because it was so foreign to those people. And then through a series of kind of circumstances, I ended up working in the commercial treatment industry again, but this time it was not on a therapeutic side or anything. I was doing a lot of business advisement and consulting because that's the line of work and profession that I was mostly trained in is kind of management and strategy consulting. And so I started working with a lot of behavioral health companies, and I started having a different experience of the industry, seeing it from the kind of point of view of a business person. And that process reactivated, I would say, a lot of old trauma that I didn't even know I had, to be frank. But it just kind of got my wheels turning. And as a behavioral scientist generally, there's kind of a neurotic curiosity that I have generally about these things and how systems work and what incentive structures look like and things like that any good behavioral economist would be curious about. So I wanted to kind of start understanding that from the industry side. And through sort of a reverse engineering process, I just started meeting and coming in contact with a lot of the people from my past, some of whom were practitioners that were still in the field, where I was like, oh my God, I cannot believe that you were still doing this. How is this legal? To some people that were, survivors that went through the programs
Mm.
and it was interesting of several years ago when Paris Hilton, quite frankly, kind of broke the mold and really kind of threw the gauntlet down on the industry and started sharing quite openly about her experience. I was working in the treatment industry at that time. And I can tell you from the provider side, there was a lot of either outright denial or just full out, we're just going to pretend like this didn't happen. But there were a lot of people that were really bad mouthing her, bad mouthing a lot of other survivors in the
Mhm.
industry, and just writing them off as like, oh, these people are rabble rousers. They're just, trying to stir up the pot. They were all crazy, this and that. And it really pissed me off a little bit because I was like, well, wait a minute. I'm a survivor. Are you saying that I'm crazy or that this didn't happen to me? And it always kind of brought up a really interesting conversation within like industry people where I call it the ABBAs, you kind of are like, oh, so are you saying that I'm a liar and that I made this up? And it's like, ah, bah, 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 bah. They try and start explaining things away. And so I just, at that point, I had found a thread and I just wanted to keep pulling on it. And then it was just a matter of how do I, figure out a way to make this personal in terms of it is a survivor story, but also not, and I mean this with no disrespect to any of the other survivors that may have written or whatever, but I did not want to get lost in kind of the indulgence of reliving my survivor story.
Mm.
I really wanted it to be attached to kind of a greater narrative and more speak in a kind of journalistic, for lack of better words, pseudo journalistic way about the kind of macro problems that are faced in the industry. And I also thought it was important that around the time a lot of these survivor stories started coming out and about that they were all, and again, nothing wrong with this. It just was kind of the nature of the beast at the time where they were all female survivor stories. And I thought it was really important to let individuals know that men are often the victims of these types of abuses as well. I certainly was, and it's definitely taken its toll.
I find it really interesting that folks in Europe were like, "Oh, that's so American." Like, was their assumption, "Oh, that's just something that Americans do in general."
Yeah, I mean, part of it is just from a healthcare administration standpoint, the way that the Europeans approach healthcare and the way that the Americans or North Americans, for that matter, approach healthcare is just really a tale of two cities. I mean, over there, it's one of the benefits of everything being socialized over there
Yeah.
is it all in one way or another goes through the public sector, even if it's private stuff, because they do have private hospitals and private healthcare system throughout Europe and other countries in the West. It's just very much integrated with the base public healthcare system that's out
Right.
there. So you still have to go see a public healthcare doctor to go see a private healthcare specialist, if that makes sense. Whereas in the US, everything is private. There is this kind of deregulation mindset in the United States that is just, it's almost like a game of pass the buck with it's like who's gonna look after this, and it's like, oh well, the feds are gonna do it, and then they're like, we're not gonna do it, the state's gonna do it, and the state's like, well, we're not gonna do it, we'll let the county do it, and then the county's like, well, we're definitely not gonna do it, we'll let the cities do it. And the cities are like, well, I guess we have to do it. So they don't, most of them don't, quite frankly, do a very good job of it. So it's a diffused healthcare system. So their mentality towards this type of stuff it's just very different. And because we have such a diffused healthcare system in the US, it's kind of a target rich environment for families that are in crisis or individuals that are experiencing kind of hyper vulnerable situations. They're particularly if they have some kind of resources like middle
Mhm.
class, American families, which is really what I wrote a lot of my book about, where they're really just taken advantage of quite badly.
Yeah, yeah. So on the kind of flip side of that, what do you love about what you do now? What do you love about being an advocate and a speaker and an author and is what are the biggest challenges of it too?
Sure. Well, For anyone that's listening and is maybe wanting to engage in self-harm and write a book, which is what I think writing really is, it's a sophisticated form of emotional self-harm. Kidding, of course, but a
Not
lot of it
really, though.
is just really, yeah, joking, but not really joking. A lot of it is just getting clarity, and you really do have to be passionate about the subject matter and the material. One, just to stay focused long enough to try and write something down and articulate it. It really was. I mean, I love the industry and the field that I'm in because it does, despite how screwed up it is. I do feel like I'm making a difference now, particularly
Mm,
now with kind of being more open and transparent about my advocacy and being very open about my survivor story and stuff. Because before in the behavioral health industry, I was it almost felt the equivalent of like being in the closet or something like that. It was like I knew, but and other people kind of knew, but just nobody ever talked about it.
mhm.
And because the behavioral health industry is quite inbred and it's quite pathological as well. I don't know a better way of saying it, but nobody wants to upset anybody because it's kind of like 2 degrees or 3 degrees of separation. So it was quite liberating when I did finally decide, fuck it, I'm going to go do this and like we're going to, really go for it. That was quite liberating, and it really made me kind of fall in love with the work that I do all over again because now I really can. I didn't do it before, but I can be much more vocal about my advocacy for patients and their families. And, really, I see my job as trying to get a bunch of very distressed people in a very distressing moment to just calm down and make more thought out decisions because it's quite a lot of these behavioral health episodes and things that families are experiencing or individuals are experiencing. There's an old saying that is, don't make permanent choices based on temporary feelings. And
Yeah,
there's a lot of families and individuals, quite frankly, that will make very permanent and life altering decisions for their kids in very kind of impulsive moments. And a lot of that, unfortunately, is because of how the industry is done. So being able to kind of stand up for people in those moments it's very rewarding. And I love
yeah.
it. It's definitely gotten more challenging after writing the book. I mean, if you ever want to see a white hot career get ice water thrown on it, just, write a whistleblower book about the industry that you work in. It's a great way to derail a career. But um, aside from that, it's been really, yeah, it's been very rewarding on a personal level.
Yeah, yeah. Nato Shido says, keep up the good work, which I love. And we've got somebody in here just saying, popped in for a second and hi. So appreciate y'all being here. If you have any questions about the troubled teen industry or for Corey or for myself, feel free to pop them in the chat. We'll make sure to get them addressed while we're here. But yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting to me. I feel like for a while also there was a lot of emphasis, and this was before kind of the Paris Hilton coming out and speaking against it, but there was also a lot of like, what's the word? It's not like glorification, but there were all these reality TV shows, Scared Straight, and like all those kinds of things that they would put kids through these, or even to all the talk shows. We're like, we're gonna send you to a prison to see what it's really like, and even in those, even though it's not a specific program, although they probably were, and I just don't remember them pushing a specific program at the time. It's one of those things that it's like, those are just watching those is very traumatic. You can see the trauma happening, the trauma unfolding. And looking back now, I don't watch much live TV anymore. It's the age of streaming services, right? So maybe they're still going on, but I feel like for a while there, it was really out there and in your face as well.
Yeah, there has been this interesting almost popularization and kind of even in an odd way, this kind of fetishization of recovery
Yeah.
culture. And it's almost like, I mean, recovery, I think, is a very real thing. And that looks very different for everybody in every way. I think historically, there's not a lot of science in mental health. I know that sounds like a little bit of an anathema, but if you think about it from just like a general healthcare perspective, it's really kind of in its infancy in a lot of ways. And I think one of the reasons that it's so screwed up, for lack of better words, is that it's always kind of been the like redheaded stepchild of medicine in general. So it's kind of like, oh God, it's these people that we're going to deal with. You know what I mean? It's like the people that people already don't want to deal with them. Nobody likes the crazy person or the really drunk person at the end of the night or the drug addict that's running around screaming at themselves. So there is an element of like, okay, let's just make this person go away as quickly as we possibly can without having to listen to them as much as possible, because troubled people are troubling to be around often. That's part of that's and sometimes there's some volatility and stuff like that involved in it. So there's just, again, kind of an impulsivity towards like, all right, let's just do something with this. And then because the field is really like in its infancy still, a lot of stuff that just gets kind of passed on as like fact is actually not fact at all. And you get a lot of these, particularly now in the age of streaming and even on those shows and stuff, because the licensing and all of that stuff is so like flimsy, that there are a lot of people that are really positioning themselves as like experts in the field that know nothing at all about it. And it's
Mhm.
like, what the hell is this person doing talking about this? They've never, uh, and it's become almost this kind of like pop culture component where it's almost like pop psychology or pop psychiatry or pop, whatever, where it's like, oh, it's all in the body, we'll just figure it out or, whatever. And then you have a lot of these people that know nothing about nothing that are passing themselves on as like, experts. And even some of the experts in like, therapy and stuff like that. And I mean, nothing bad about these people, but folks like Gabor Mate and even Brene Brown and folks like that, they all get kind of bundled into this like general psychology kind of language and vernacular that just gets thrown around and kind of gets recycled into popular culture, where a lot of the sayings don't really mean anything, like trauma.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Everybody uses that word trauma today, almost to the point where it means nothing anymore. It's like, oh, I have trauma. It's like, well, what did you drop your orange mocha frappuccino on the way to your chemistry class today? Is that the trauma we're talking about? Or is it like, you know, big trauma? So the phrases get kind of thrown around a lot and it just makes it a little harder to like pass off. But because of that, it kind of, because of that process as well, it also kind of just makes like these armchair diagnoses fact. And we see a lot of that these days. It's like, oh, well, oh my God, I was listening to this influencer on TikTok, or I saw this, Brene Brown video on this or that, or I did this. So, and they kind of like self-diagnose themselves. And it's
Mhm.
like, no, no, no. This is like, these things really mean something. And I think the behavioral health industry has kind of done itself a real discredit in the way that it's tried to popularize itself
Yeah.
almost. And it's like, you know, uh, a mental illness isn't like a lifestyle choice. You know what I mean? It's not like drinking oat milk or deciding that, you want to live in Brooklyn or, whatever. It's not, it's not a lifestyle choice. It's like a legitimate, pathology. Um, and I think, the whole like sober curious recovery, like, the whole like mocktail world, it reminds me a lot of religion. It's kind of put on
Mhm.
this like almost religious face to it, where it's almost like an us or them kind of thing. And it's like, oh, there are those people that drink and that do this or that. And then there are those other people. And to me, that just seems very unhealthy,
Yeah.
doesn't seem very productive. You wouldn't be like, oh, those people with the flu and then those other people. You know what I mean? It's like this, it seems a little ridiculous. Or those diabetics, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Can't handle
Yeah.
them. It's just, to me, it seems a bit absurd.
Yeah. You bringing up kind of the just pop psychology piece of it and the folks who are getting recognized as experts when not really being experts in those fields. I was just watching a documentary and I wish I could remember which one it was, but they went through several different people's stories and it's obviously these huge, awful, terrible stories of, child sex predators and like all these things and someone married them and then they have these psychologists come on and they'll be like, "Well, clearly this guy has da da da." And it's like, "Did you do any sessions with him? Are you just basing it on one person's side of this? Did you actually what's the basis for it?" But the way that they put it in these shows, it's like they're the expert here it is. And then you go to their, because of course all of them have YouTube channels. You go look them up. I'm curious and I'm like, who are these people that they have on the screen? And so you go look them up and it's like their YouTube channel has nothing to do with the one that they're with what they're talking about. Uh-oh, it looks like we might have lost video feed, but that's okay. But yeah, it's just one of those things that it's like, what are the credentials? What is happening here? Where did you find these people? Did they just agree to come on? And it's very interesting to me.
Yeah, a lot of it.
It makes me question a little bit, and I feel like it puts the whole field of mental health in a bad position whenever you're doing things like that, because it's like, well, they said this, and later whenever it comes out that that wasn't true, okay, now who do we trust? Now what do we trust? Now where do we go from here?
Yeah, and it really does. And you're quite right. Like a lot of these, most of the coaching and the stuff I do with families, they don't realize that most of the people that they're talking to they don't have any kind of license to do what they're doing. And because they don't have a license to do what they're doing, that means that they have nothing, there's no risk for them. So that it's why we have like licensing bodies. If a doctor screws up, if I like go to see you and I'm like, man, my shoulder's really like, going, you're like, oh, I'm going to operate on your shoulder. If you come back to me and you're like, hey, that shoulder operation, I accidentally left some stuff in there and we're going to have to go back in and like, you're probably not going to be able to use your shoulder again. I mean, in addition to, that being a horrible experience, you're probably going to get in a lot of trouble with your licensing board as a doctor. There's going to be some, significant lawsuits that take place and, some people are going to have some things to say. In the behavioral health field, if, Jane decides I'm a life coach and I'm going to start a YouTube channel and she starts, you need to get off those meds or you shouldn't be doing that or, oh, this or that or, oh, girl, you know, he's just a little, they know nothing about nothing. And then they start handing out these diagnoses and people start adjusting their life and making major life decisions and health decisions based on that. There's no mechanism for accountability with those people.
Yeah.
I mean, you could maybe try and sue them if that were, a possibility, but, who are you going to report them to? The Better Business Bureau, maybe, if they'll do anything. But
Yes.
there are no like, state licensing bodies or anything. So with a lot of these program owners, these like treatment programs, which there is legitimate treatment out there. And it's unfortunate because I make this distinction in my book between, the industry, which is just that it's an industry. It's like a beast that's just constantly feeding itself. And then the profession and there are many legitimate providers out there that are really good therapists. They're good forensics. They're good psychiatrists. And they're really just, doing they're doing God's work. They're doing the tough day in, day out, like dealing with very difficult situations and helping them process it. And those people should be supported and quite frankly, rewarded generously for the work that they do. There's just in the sea that is the behavioral health industry, there are very few there aren't nearly enough fish that are doing the work that need to be
Mhm.
done, so to speak. So it's just really easy for families to get sold because most of the people that they're talking to, they're salespeople. They're not really like healthcare professionals or licensed doctors or something like that. They're salespeople and they're trying to pitch you on something. And if
Yeah.
what is that? There's that old saying in like a con, if you don't know who the mark is, then you're the mark. So, in those situations, it's kind of a perfect storm if you think about it. You get families that are in crisis. They're emotionally, maybe they have a kid. In my case, I was like 15 years old. I was very emotionally disturbed, angry. My parents probably not probably, they thought I was a pain in the ass anyway. So they were like, just get this kid out of our house. And, along comes a treatment program, some counselors that, knew nothing about nothing. And they were like, oh man, your kid's going to die. And this is going to happen and that's going to happen. And that's a hell of a thing to be told if you're a parent. I mean, I'm not even a parent. I have nieces and Jesus, if somebody called me and were like, hey, the twins are really struggling and they could die. I mean, I'd do whatever I needed to do to
Yeah.
help them. And these programs know it. So, they get you in a very vulnerable situation and it, a lot of times families get get taken to the cleaners. I mean, I was in treatment with this one kid who spent $2 million, and he was 15, same age as
Oh
me.
my gosh.
His family had spent $2 million by the time they had gotten to the treatment center that I was in
Wow.
with him.
Wow. But yeah, I mean, you're right. I would do anything for my kids. No matter the cost, I would go into any amount of debt if it was something that I was convinced was
Totally.
going to save their life. Fine, like I'll do it. I do not have $2 million. Please do not charge me $2 million for anything related to my children. But
Yeah.
I want to read a
Well, and
couple
the
of.
the truth is, the
Oh, go
truth
ahead.
is that 2 million is like ridiculous, and that
Yeah.
a lot of what I do with families now, if I do like family facing work and stuff like that, is basically coach them out of making a lot of these big ticket prices because mental health's not something that you can just. It's a major misnomer, but it's not like these 30-day fixes, or it's like, oh, you'll go to treatment and you'll this and that. It's like it's not something that you can't microwave yourself out of a
Yeah.
mental health crisis. You know what I mean? It's a slow burn process.
I want to read a couple of comments from the chat, and then I have we're going to kind of go a little bit back, and then we're going to move forward into kind of deeper into your story. But Nato Shido says the game space is a bit fragmented. I've been enjoying a lot of authors not binding their gender, which allows said games to be free. Like the House of Tesla, the protagonist is not sex or gender defined, at least from the beginning of the game. And obviously, Tesla existed in history. I love that in games. I think that that's a really cool thing. And whenever I play games, I like it whenever the body types aren't tied to gender necessarily, and some of the body features aren't tied to gender necessarily, because it's fun. It's fun to play with, and I think games are a really good way to allow yourself a little bit of escapism sometimes when needed and when healthy, as long as you don't go to like an unhealthy place with it. But yeah, I think that it's a really neat thing. I'm glad to see more and more of that for sure. And then Tib in the chat has better help in quotation marks, with help in quotation marks. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely mental health in general is a huge industry. It's a money making industry at this point, especially with all of these apps and things being like, it's cheaper to just go to us and pay us money out of pocket instead of using your insurance, which is sometimes true, unfortunately. But yeah, it's money making, and that's a bummer.
Yeah, I mean, there are some structural problems for sure that need to be addressed in the way that we fund and administer healthcare in the United States. Because I mean, across the board, it's punitively expensive. But funny enough, you say that it's a money making industry. It's very true. But I mean, if you look at what the United States spends on healthcare every year, I think we spend between like I think it's like 3.8 and 5 something $trillion a year on healthcare is what we spend in the U.S. Only 3% of that is on behavioral health care, but 3 to 5% depending. But that little 3 to 5% makes up for almost 20% of all healthcare fraud in the
Oh
United
wow.
States.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
wild.
yeah, yeah. So it's a big cost driver particularly for like insurance companies and stuff like that.
Yeah. And then Tib says, as a teen, I would bottle up everything because of experiences like these. Out of fear, my parents would overreact and send me away to some messed up treatment. Oh, the threat of it. Yeah. And then you're repressing a bunch of stuff that you don't need to be repressing. Great. If you can express everything the way you need to express it. I have a 12-year-old, and he and I have started having some conversations about like, hey, your attitude's changing quite a bit. And my reaction to that is going to take some time to adjust. Like I have to adjust to this new person who's emerging. But it's okay for you to still express frustration and to express it in ways that are not harmful. And they're not harmful to you. They're not harmful to me. They're not harmful to other people. We just need to work through it in general. But not everyone gets that. Sometimes you get a preteen or a teenager, and you as a parent are just like, what the fuck just happened? And you don't know how to react to that. So yeah, it's tough on both sides for sure, but more on the teen, I would think.
Yeah, I mean, there's also, I think, a tendency in this culture that we live in, or country, or whatever, is that we tend to look at there's a tendency to like pathologize everything. So like when, you know, being a teenager it's always sucked. I don't know a better,
Yeah.
when people are doing it, it's like, look, man, this is just, I don't know a better way of telling you this, but like, the next, like, from 12 to 19 or 20, it's going to be a little shitty. I don't know
Yep.
a better way of telling you that, but like, it's not all bad or whatever, but like, your hormones are all over the place. You're, becoming sexually active. There are parts of the brain that start activating again because your hormones start developing and stuff like that. Your body is like physically changing. If you're a female, you start having like menstrual cycles and stuff like that. It's like, look, I don't know what to tell you. Your face looks like a nuclear bomb went off on it some days. It's like, it's like this is going to suck, but it's not like a problem. It's just a developmental stage. And a lot of what I do working with kids or families that have like troubled teens or whatever is again, just kind of talking them off a ledge a little bit and being like, look, I understand that, your kid's a pain in the ass or like, you want to drown your daughter in the pool or like, whatever the experience that a parent may be having at that time. And a lot of the time there, I say the kind of tongue in cheek situation, but I think that's also what happens with parents is they start because of that. It's a relationship renegotiation is really what
Yeah,
happens is because they
definitely.
turn into like little adults. Their perception of the world and everything starts changing. So you kind of move from like God to just like not God. And then they're kind of disappointed that that you're not God. They never tell you that, but like, they really looked up to you. And then it's like, oh, you're just a human, mom. And the parents sometimes have a hard time with that too. On the other side, it's like it's like, no, my little baby boy, he thought I was everything. And now he's telling me he hates me and he wants to spend time with his dad instead. So he must be going nuts and we got to send him away somewhere. It's like, look, he could, he or she or they or whomever, they're just being dickheads right now. And
Mhm.
unfortunately, that isn't a behavioral health issue. That's just like a developmental problem. And, but it is a bit of a dance. And I think with a lot of families, the first thing I tell them to do is to get attached to like an actual forensic clinician that can, you know, give you a proper diagnosis or not. And if they say like, hey, this kid's like normal, other than like, maybe this or that, then, you just kind of let that deal with it. But most stuff can be done in an outpatient setting.
Yeah. And then Blue Bedlam also says, I still don't talk to therapists about some of my life because I don't want to deal with mandated reporting for things that happen to me. That's rough also.
Yeah. I mean, I would, as a rule of thumb, always err on the side of if you don't feel like you can be honest with your therapist, then you probably should get a new therapist gen- generally. But yeah, I mean, some concerns are I definitely understands people. I understand people's anxiety around it
Hmm.
because it's gotten very messy, and I don't think the behavioral health industry has done itself any favors with a lot of these knuckleheads that they've let kind of get away with this stuff.
So, do you have a true crime story that fascinates you?
Oh God. I feel like I've lived a true crime story in like a weird way. It's the way, I was in what was for all purposes a cult for from the time I was 15 until I was 20. And, I was there along with hundreds of other kids that were all in the same situation. And while we were in those, facilities with those people for years, I mean, we didn't have regular jobs. We didn't go to school, didn't get any education during that
Oh,
time.
wow.
We just like hung out with each other, goofed off and had a lot of fun. I mean, it was great as a kid, like just having fun and, doing this and that, but there were a lot of developmental and like psychological problems that I had and that other kid and, some real abuse and neglect and things that, were really significant that just didn't even get addressed. I mean, I was there for 5 years. I never saw a psychiatrist once. I never saw a therapist once. I just saw the counselors. And, to me, the true crime, it's like the best true crime story in the world. It's like not only did these guys do this to like thousands and thousands of kids, but they made tens of millions of dollars off of this. And nothing, I mean, kids have killed themselves, families have been completely destroyed, countless amounts of money has been lost, government fraud, all of that. And these guys are just walking around, hanging out at Walmart, going to Dodger games, like thousands upon thousands of these kids that they've ruined their lives, you know?
So I'm going to back up a little bit. For those who might not have heard of the troubled teen industry, what exactly does it include?
Yeah, so the teen treatment industry is kind of a broad spectrum, and it covers everything from like individual therapy to what could be like kind of basic residential programs for think of like the 30-day treatment centers and stuff like that. Then there's so that's all what I would call the kind of industry standard treatment. There's residential treatment, there's partial hospitalization programming, there's outpatient treatment, and then there's just uh, you know regular therapy and stuff like that. The troubled teen industry, you can identify it by a couple things. One is it tends to be a lot more longer term. So they instead of a 30 or 60-day program, a lot of the troubled teen programs, not necessarily all of them, but a lot of them, most of them are very long term. So you're going to go there for like 6 months to a year, probably like a couple years, depending. The other component about them too is because they're so long term, they tend not to be evidence based programs. So if they were evidence based programs, they would be doing something probably around like long-term psychodynamic or psychoanalytic group programming and stuff like that, which is amazing. It's like I've done it. I did it in the UK. It's brilliant. Like it's probably one of the most like life-altering therapeutic processes that I've personally ever done and on my own. Or not on my own, but like with a therapist therapeutically. But most of these programs are like a year. They're going to be in the woods or something like that, or they'll be at like a boarding school and then a lot of them use a lot of non-evidence based practices. So they tend to be very dogmatic too. So a lot of them are like hyper abstinence based. There's a lot of them that are faith based. So they're like very Christian, which, there's nothing wrong. There are some really good faith based addiction treatment centers that are
Yeah.
actually very good programs and they're not abusive but they come at it from a Christian angle and that's, totally fine. If that's your jam, then like absolutely. But a lot of them, those are kind of like they're Christian in the sense that like they're run by nuns or something like that. You know what I mean? But the programming and the evidence, it's scientifically based. It's science backed. So it's like
Yeah.
doctors, adults, licensed people that are kind of running it. A lot of the troubled teen places are owned by, they'll do a lot of stuff with like peer pressure and peer based support, which there's, not a lot of evidence around that at all. They're very 12-step oriented and utilize a lot of the kind of 12-step AA and dogma and narrative, which again, those are, fine programs. They help a lot of people, but they can be very culty and it's not an evidence based practice. And they tend to really, they tend to really kind of brand themselves as almost like a lifestyle thing,
Hmm.
and whenever I talk to parents about these places and I'm like, get a feel for them, like talk to them the way you would like a college recruiter that was trying to get your kid to go to, do they go to Yale or do they go to Dartmouth? Like which one, and it's like, I think it's so funny that these families, a lot of whom have, a lot of them have no money, but a lot of them have not a lot of them, but some of them have quite a lot of money, and they have more money than they will ever be able to spend. And despite that, they're very meticulous business people and stuff. And if they were buying a car or a house or something, they would do so much background information and diligence on all of this stuff. But for these like treatment things, some of which can cost like hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars even, they're just like, "Oh, yeah, okay, they said it was alright, so, like, I guess we're gonna go with it." And I'm like, "Oh my god, no, you need to look into this the way you would a school for your kid, because it's gonna have way more of an effect on them developmentally than a school ever would," you know?
Can you share a bit of what led up to you being sent to a troubled teen program?
Yeah, I mean, I was a messed up kid from the get-go. I mean, I was born in, we were just or white trash is really what I was. I grew up in a very disenfranchised economically family in rural Georgia. My dad was like, an electrician basically, and my mother was very mentally ill and suffered with a lot of problems. And we were just really poor. And I grew up in trailer parks and playing in trash cans and stuff like that. So it was, I mean, just growing up in that environment was kind of rough in of itself. And then, I genetically probably, not probably, I genetically inherited some of my mother's, depression tendencies and stuff like that. There wasn't anything else for kids in our part of the world to do other than, shoot guns, drink, and do stupid shit that usually involves shooting guns and drinking. So it was kind of an inevitability that I got that, I was like a perfect candidate to these treatment centers, and not that there's anything wrong with kids that come from that background or anything like that. Again, it's that kind of like being a teenager isn't a mental health being poor isn't a mental health diagnosis, They're socioeconomic circumstances. But the programs, a lot of times they won't even look at the like socioeconomic components of it. They'll just look at like some of the behaviors and be like, oh, well, he's doing drugs or he's drinking. He's getting in trouble with this and that. So, at 15 years old, they didn't ask me one question about my mother's drinking, her depression, my drinking, any of that. They were just like, you're a drug addict and an alcoholic. Which is kind of a damning thing to say to a 15-year-old kid, because that's gonna stick with you for the rest of your life. You now have a diagnosis that's written next to your name. And, so it's quite stigmatizing, but also when you're a disruptive teenager and your life is already disruptive, these guys they were very clever the way that they did it, but it was like, "Man, you're so screwed up. You're doing this and you're doing that, and, like, man, you're so screwed up, you don't even know it." And for most teenagers, you don't have to push hard to convince them that there's something wrong with them. It's like, no shit, there's something wrong with me. This is like the most evidential thing in the world. Look at me. Look at what's happening to my body right now. Something's wrong with me. So, it's a bit, I think, dangerous the way that these programs just kind of shell out these things, because not only are you being talked to by a trusted provider, someone that you look at as an authority figure and that thinks you don't know that they don't know what they're talking about. This, some 15-year-old kid or what. I had no idea. This guy, he was like, "Oh, I'm a drug abuse counselor," and to me, I was like, "Oh, that must mean you know something." And looking back on it now, it was like, oh my God, this guy's a fucking idiot. Like he has no idea what he got that certification online for like $150.
Right.
Like what? You know what I mean? And now me and my family are making like life decisions based on this guy's advice. Some like 21-year-old or something. So it was kind of a perfect storm for me, and kind of coming from that family, and they just laid out like perfectly. They were like, "Man, you're screwed." And they also convinced me quite compellingly, and this is, I think where the peer support comes in is that it wasn't just the counselors. It's one thing if they're telling you like, "Oh man, this is you." But then when you have a group of like 25 or 30 kids that are all your age, they're your peers, they're cool, they're good looking, they're trying to like influence you, whatever. And they're all like, "Yeah, man, you're one of us. You're one of us." It's like, okay, I'm one of you. Sure, sure. 'Cause you don't really know what it means.
Yeah.
You're just like, I like these people. They're giving me attention. Uh,
And you're a
I
teenager.
want
You
to
want
be
to
here.
fit in.
Totally. Yeah. So, the environment's quite predatory.
Mhm.
I would say it's, again, like what I was talking about before. It's ripe for exploitation.
Yeah. And you're
And
saying like,
my family is perfect for it.
yeah, you're put in front of these people, these adults as a teenager, and as a teenager, you're going to think, okay, well, this is an adult. My parents know that this adult is here, therefore I should listen to this adult. Like that's the extent of how far you really think about whether or not someone's qualified to do something generally.
Absolutely.
When did you realize something was wrong?
I mean, there were a couple times when I was in the treatment center that I was having like full-fledged, like looking back on it now, I should have been like hospitalized in
Mhm.
those instances, but I was having like full-fledged psychiatric episodes there. And I remember talking to them one time. I was like quite suicidal actually, and I was really worried that I was going to harm myself. And I just remember one of the counselors at the time really just kind of dressed me down for it. He was like, "Man, you are so fucking selfish. And, do you know this and that, whatever?" And I was like, wait a I mean, I was like 17, something like that at the time, and just really going through a rough time. And even at that point, I was kind of like, maybe, I don't know, man. Like, I don't, I think something's, going on. But you kind of go through it. And then when I got out, I mean, something is really bad when you go to AA meetings. Cause at the time I was going to AA meetings and doing all that stuff because I was sober. They were like, you're a drug addict and an alcoholic. And if you ever even look at this stuff again, you'll die. And I was like, oh my God. So I'm not going to do that. And, it's bad when you start going to AA meetings and they're like, man, you're pretty weird. Like, what the fuck is going on with you? And, because I mean, AA again, it's a great organization, but it can be pretty culty too. Anyone that's ever been to like any of those meetings, it's an interesting place for sure. With some interesting characters there. And, it's pretty bad when even the kind of crazy people in AA are like, this kid sounds like, I mean, they used to just tell me like a year or so into AA, they're like, man, what the fuck is wrong? Pardon my French for saying it this way, but they would just ask me sometimes like, what the fuck are you thinking, dude? Like, who told you that? And I'd be like, oh no, it's because of this. And I'd explain what the counselors had told me. And they were like, man, you're a fucking idiot. Like you have no idea what you're talking about, Do it's pretty bad when even the guys in AA are like, yo, this is weird. A few years into that, that's when I was kind of like, oh man, this is not good. And I actually met a physician in AA who kind of saved my life. He really helped me in a lot of ways. And he was a doctor, so I kind of trusted him and listened to him. And he was like, yeah, I think you should see like a professional person and start actually doing things that doctors tell you to do. And I was like, okay. And he was right. It saved my life.
AA can be really helpful. And I know sometimes if you've never been to an AA meeting, I've been to an Al-Anon meeting, several Al-Anon meetings. And as part of that, they encourage you to like attend an AA meeting as well. And if you've never been to one and you're on the outside and you're like, oh, I've heard of AA, it does great things. It's just people. It's just alcoholics supporting other alcoholics, and not like supporting them drinking, supporting them in their sobriety and getting sober and being a support group, essentially. But it's just people. That's something that I don't know that a lot of folks understand about AA, is that the reason so many chapters are super different from one another is that it's just a group of people over here, and it's just a group of people over here. And it can be really, really good. And that's why you'll hear some folks say like, oh, this place in this city is super great. Don't go to this one over here though, in this city. Like that one's not as good. So I love AA. Think it's really, really good. And it can really be super helpful for folks who need it. But yeah, it's another one of those, it can feel really culty because sometimes it turns into its own little clique, its own little cult.
Yeah, there is certainly an element in AA that can feel a bit like it's just like a religious component. They can be very dogmatic, and it's like, oh, you gotta do this and you gotta do that, and this is just how it is, and whatever. It's fine, but I mean, I certainly dealt with this, and I was very fortunate that I kind of fell in with a physician who kind of looked after me and stuff. But I mean, I would get stuff all the time about like, oh, you shouldn't take medication, or you shouldn't do this, or you shouldn't do that, or and people acting like relationship counselors, or a lot of that. And yeah, I think AA it's a great organization, but I think you said it beautifully. It's just people. It's peer support. It's like everyone's different. I'd take anything that anyone says in there with a grain of salt. It's just,
Tib says, I've been to one as an outsider. The thing I don't like is the counting days chip thing. IMO, once you quit, it should just be thought of as a thing, no longer a part of your life. I mean, yes. And for some people, that's super meaningful. For some people, it's not that meaningful. So it depends if you get meaning out of it. And that's one of the things that I do like about AA is it's like, take what is meaningful to you and like leave the rest. And then whenever they talk about the religion part of it, it's like, what's your higher power? They're not necessarily tying it to a specific religion. So yeah, there's good and bad, I think, in that especially. So how did those experiences, how did they shape the way you think about trust and authority or control today?
That's a great, how do they not shape how I think of authority and control? I mean, I will say that it has given me, I'll share my kind of personal viewpoint with this, is that when I got out of the treatment centers and I kind of realized what had been done to me, for lack of a better word, that I had been in a lot of ways just systematically abused and brainwashed for like 5 years. And when I say abuse, I don't mean like I was never hit. Nobody ever did anything like sexually to me, but it was definitely emotional manipulation and abuse, like a lot of emotional and psychological abuse. I kind of chalked all that up to the fact that I chalked it up to ignorance, if that makes sense, because I was 15. My parents were very uneducated. You know, my dad was an electrician with a high school degree. My mom had no education whatsoever. So my family were very like blue collar working class. They just, you don't know what you don't know. And I saw that as weakness for sure. So I made a little vow to myself that I was going to get as educated as I possibly could so that I would never be bamboozled like that again. And 6 degrees later, here I am with, all of that. And it's afforded me a level of intellectual skepticism, if that makes healthy, very healthy intellectual skepticism and a good, you know, radar for bullshit from a lot of these providers. So it definitely involved me getting a lot of therapy and stuff to kind of redefine my relationship with like power and power structures. But, it's no surprise to me that I did my PhD in the things that I did my PhD in on power structures and like human behavior and incentives and all of that, because it is something that's really fascinating to me. And I mean, we're all both agents of and victims of power at one way or another. We all have it and we exercise it in certain ways. And then we've all been victimized by the way that other people exercise their use of power. So I find that kind of fascinating from just the human condition standpoint, but it's certainly made me just generally far more skeptical and questioning of all systems and institutions. There's just always kind of a gnawing question that I have with anything is I'm like, I wonder what's going on behind the scenes there. I wonder what's going on behind the scenes there, you know?
Yeah. Just kind of giving you that little bit of let's scratch it. Let's scratch the surface of that a little bit.
Yeah, there is yeah, it's almost like there is like a morbid curiosity.
Why do you think the troubled teen industry continues to thrive despite the reports of abuse and all the stories that are out there?
I mean, I think it's because we haven't, I think people keep using the same shitty system that we offer them until you offer them something different. And I think until we as like citizens, consumers, patients start demanding different approaches and start demanding accountability more. And I think, for a long time they were able to get away with it because it was just it was different times. But I do think one of the benefits of social media and kind of what's going on now is there are changes that are coming, and you do see the industry, although very slowly, start making some changes. But again, it's one of those things where it's a population of people that nobody wants to deal with. Nobody wants to deal with like troubled kids. And anytime you have a vulnerable, troubled population of individuals, you're going to have abuses. It's just, unfortunately, it's the way that it's always the way that it is. I think that what we can do though, and what I do see as hopeful is that, consumers and patients generally are getting more and more educated on this. And because mental health care is developing quite rapidly and it's becoming more mainstream, there's going to be an accountability component to that where more and more consumers are going to get educated and they're going to be like, well, hey, wait a minute. Why are you doing this? And why are you doing that? And I do think some of it is starting to change now a little bit with like the social media stuff and things like that, because quite frankly, parents are getting more aware of it too. And I think once parents kind of get a clock on this stuff and are like, oh, wait a minute, and trust me, I come across people all the time that it should have never been parents, ever been parents. My parents are great examples of that. Should have never been parents. But even my parents, who were not winning any awards on parenting at all, on a fundamental level, they love me,
Yeah.
and I don't know any, even like really bad parents, they love their kids. And I don't know anyone that actively wishes like harm upon their children, you know, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? So I think the more that we have these conversations, parents are just going to be more and more cognizant of that.
You touched on this a little bit earlier, but what role do social class and race or gender play with who ends up in these programs and then also how they're treated?
Oh, well, I mean, race, class, and gender mean everything, particularly class, because if you don't, then they just don't care. Most of these like troubled teen organizations and stuff like that, they talk a good game and they're all like kumbaya and let's have fires and yo, bro, we love you, man, like all of that. But at the end of the day, they don't give a fuck. They love you to the extent that they can cash your check. And as soon as that check stops, you're going. They may not throw you out that day because they don't want to look overtly opportunistic, but like you're going to be going. And so they're overwhelmingly white, very waspy, Anglo-Saxon Protestant, some Catholics in there definitely. But there's a reason that these programs keep popping up in like luxurious Montana or in the mountains of Wyoming or Utah or something like that. They're not building these programs in Compton or in South Chicago or in South Boston or something like that. You know what I mean? It's not happening in like Brooklyn Heights or something like that. It's you know what I mean? These aren't like poor Black and Latino kids that these companies are spending millions of dollars to outreach to. That it's middle class white families that they can bill, and they bill a hell of a lot of money. Some of these programs are like 30, 40, 50, $60,000 a month, and they want you to stay there for like 6, 9 months a year. So families are, remortgaging their house, cashing in on their retirement, and before they were taking out like, uh, second more when interest rates were lower and stuff like that. So a lot of them now are hurting mostly because the economy's been stretched a little bit more. So families aren't as willing to like go into debt as they normally would be. But I still talk to people all the time that are at least once a week that are like, yeah, we're going to mortgage our house or we're going to do this or we're going to do that. And that's where I personally like to come in and be like, look, let's think about this. And there are some other options. And a lot of it's just people don't know how to think about these things. And it's really, I think, the role of a good consultant or anyone is just to teach them how to think about things in these types of situations. And it's like, okay, you could spend a whole lot of money on this and refinance your house and this and that. But the outcomes on most of these programs are horrific too. I mean, they all lie and will be like, oh, we have these amazing outcomes and blah, blah, blah. But if you really dig underneath the numbers, it's like one in 8. These are not great. I would never go to a heart surgeon that had a like 1 in 8
Right.
success rate. You know what I mean? So, um, a lot of these things are like coin tosses at best.
How do you get connected with parents who are considering these programs? How does that connection happen generally?
Usually through like I do a lot of work with therapists and educators. I go on a lot of podcasts and do stuff like this. So this kind of way, just letting people know that there are people like me out there because there are a lot of just shysters, you know what I mean? And a lot of these, even consultants and stuff, they're just in it to get you signed up for the month. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Because they tend to operate in like 30-day billing cycles. So, they're just there to like, yeah, sure, pay me $10,000 or, whatever it is, and I'll get this sorted for you, and a lot of it's just, they're snake oil salesmen. I don't know a better way of saying it. Families don't always like the conversations that I have with them because I will be very honest with them about like one, whether I'm even willing to like consult with them or not. And because, a lot of people, it's very easy to spend a lot of money because it's almost like they'll want to bring you on just so you can make the problem go away for them. And it's like, look, I'm not interested in doing that. That's like the
Yeah.
last thing in the world that I want to do because it's an unreasonable ask. I can't just make this go away. Like this is something that you guys are going to have to do. And it's really just kind of facilitating their own growth in that process. And so they reach out to me usually through therapist, some kind of educator or something. They'll see me on a podcast. They can find me on my website and any of that stuff if they want to look me up. But yeah, I mean, usually the first thing that I have to say to families is like, I'm so sorry that you're having to talk to me, is because usually
Yeah.
by the time they do talk to me, they've spent a lot of money and they're kind of at their wits' end with a lot of things. So, I mean, I would have never thought that a poor kid from a trailer park in Grovetown, Georgia would have built a career out of keeping wealthy mostly like wealthy or middle class families from getting ripped off by treatment centers. But like, that's a living. It's an honest living. So, um,
Yeah.
yeah, but that's really a lot of what I do is kind of coaching families to just like calm down. You don't need to spend a lot of money or make a lot of rash decisions right now. Like This is, a lot of it is like allowing them to kind of take the power back
Yeah.
in the process.
Man, I'm stuck on that $30,000 a month, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a month. It's hard enough for me. It's like $10,000 a semester for my oldest to be in college right now. And that's hard enough. And
Exactly. Yeah.
like I said earlier, like I'll do anything for my kids, and if it was something that was really necessary, I would find a way. But damn, that's 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 hard. That's hard.
Oh God, there are places here in the U.S. I mean, there's a spot in Texas that it's like 75 or $85,000 every 2 weeks.
Oh my God. I'm
There's
in
a place
Texas,
in
and that's, I mean, I hate being here, but I'm stuck here for now. But yeah, like that's insane. That's insane. Texas is supposed to be cheap.
yeah. Well, there's a few folks that I've worked with, and they were spending $300,000 a month on care for their loved one, and they were getting
Man,
completely ripped off, like
yeah.
completely ripped off. And those are always very difficult conversations to have. Where you're getting fleeced. I don't know a better way of telling you this, but like
Yeah.
you
So
don't need any of this.
what kind of marketing tactics or language are these places using to make their programs seem legitimate to parents?
Have you ever seen the movie Almost Famous? Oh, there's a really great line in that movie, and it's not the like "your home" line that everyone usually thinks about. Anyway, it's just a throwaway line, but he says, "Friendship is the booze that they feed you." And really, in these circumstances, it's very. I mean, they know how to come at you. They come as like, "Oh, we're here to we're the solution." You know what I mean? And a lot of them, it's like, they market themselves as like, this is the thing that you've been looking for. Oh God, what are this is missing. This is that piece. Find inner well-being, find that, you know what I mean? So they use very aspirational language, a lot of aspirational marketing. They use a lot of, they're very sophisticated with it. I mean, some of these companies spend millions of dollars a month on digital advertising and Google ads. And, they partner with big data companies, so they know who you are and where you are and what you're looking at and all of that stuff. So they have quite sophisticated marketing mechanisms, but that is kind of part of the education process that I work with families on, as well as like, look, this is what's marketing, this is what's fluff, and this is what's like legitimate. And there's a lot of fluff that they pass
Yeah.
off as like fact, and it's like, that's not fact, that's just fluff. That's like a marketing brochure with
Right.
some like really shitty outcome study data put on there.
Yeah. Tibb says how many of these families feel forced to make a rash decision so that their teen doesn't spoil the rest of the children or the family. Yeah, I mean, if you've got that kind of thing in your advertising feed of that idea already, it's a draw, I would
Well,
imagine.
yeah, I mean, a lot of the what I tell families is that anytime you call one of these treatment programs, ask them who you're talking to. And most of the time, 90% of the time, it's going to be an admissions specialist. Now, they may have a bunch of different titles for that or whatever, but at the end of the day, that person is not a social worker. They're not a doctor. They're not a therapist. They're nothing. They're a salesperson. And their
Yeah.
whole job is to get you to commit to coming to their treatment center. That's their whole job. And if anyone's seen The Wolf of Wall Street, it's exactly like The Wolf of Wall Street when he's sitting there talking to the guy on the phone trying to pitch him a stock. It's no different than a like a brokerage room. You have a bunch of guys, very tattooed, most of them. They're all hitting vapes, and they've got their headphones on, and they're just like kicked back like I am right now, trying to sell you on their treatment center.
Yeah. Because that's their job. That's what they're getting paid for.
That's what they get paid a whole hell of a lot of money to do is to, and they get reviewed based on the number of clients that they close every month. Like all of that it's very much a sales performance job.
Blue Bedlam asks, do you ever do expert witness work to educate courts about the treatment center? Now, the treatment children are subjected to in these programs. I work with a public defender specializing in juvenile law, and occasionally we have clients who have been through a wilderness program or similar.
I would love to do more of that. It's not something that I've done just yet, but I do work a lot with individuals that are most of the work that I do now with families. There's typically a legal component to it. And I like that because usually the patients are a lot more motivated. And if the courts are involved, there's usually a lot less foul play because nobody wants the courts to come in and be like, hey, what was going on here? So I work a lot with families on diversionary things and stuff like that. And that's quite gratifying. But the short answer is no. I haven't done anything directly with the courts for educating them, but I'd absolutely love to. And I'd be more than happy to connect and try and collaborate with that individual.
Yeah. Are there any red flags that a parent or an educator should look out for whenever they're evaluating youth programs?
Oh, there are so many. And if you go to CoreyJentry.com, you can check out my book, and there's also a downloadable guide that I have for red flags for identifying treatment centers. I mean, the biggest thing that I tell families to watch out for is if they're trying to speed the process up. That's always a red flag. So if they're trying to pressure you in any way, shape, or form to make a decision, that is not good. That is not good. And you should not go to that program. The other is to ask them if you can speak to the therapist, not the associate therapist or the counselor or the admissions person or like whoever. Ask them if you can speak to the actual therapist, licensed therapist that's going to be treating your child. If they let you do that, that's probably a good thing. And then you can ask that therapist all the questions that, and in my guide, I would ask them, you know, where did you go to school? Who did you study under? What did you study? What is your therapeutic specialty? Because therapy is a lot like, if they're like, oh, I work with anything, that's not a good therapist then. That means they don't do anything. Because like a generalized therapist is like the equivalent of a GP, it's just
Yeah.
like a doctor. And like any medical specialist will tell you that like general practitioners, they're great, but they're idiots. Not that they're idiots. It's not like they're idiots, but like they're just that. They're generalized. They have a general idea of what's, going on. Like a general practitioner has a general idea about psychiatry. He's not a psychiatrist though. He
Yeah.
he he did not do the like 6 extra years of training that psychiatrists go through when they do it. And therapists are very much the same way. There are therapists that specialize in trauma. There are therapists that specialize in like more skills focused things like CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, or dialectical behavioral therapy. There are cognitive behavioral therapists that are just focused on like it's called PCBT, so it's like, or CBT, so it's like CBT for psychosis, which is for like schizophrenics and stuff like that. DBT specialists tend to work more with like mood disorders. There are specialists that work with like more OCD measures and things like that. So it's important to find out what they specialize in and ask those kind of questions. And if they can't tell you that, if they're just like, oh, we're very good at treating this, or we're very good at, if you get these kind of like general superlatives, that's a red flag.
What does trauma-informed care really look like in comparison to all of this?
You know, it's so funny. I was talking to my editors and a bunch of people about this comment, and I was actually on the phone with a forensic, with a current case patient that I'm working with and their family now. And the physician, who is a great guy, really great physician, but he's just a general medicine guy. So he doesn't work in the addiction place. And he's the physician to this patient that I'm currently working with now. He was like, oh, well, they practice trauma informed care. And I was just like, oh my God. I was like, please don't ever say that to me again. It's almost like one of those buzzwords that's just gotten like so dumbed down that it doesn't mean anything anymore. It's like, of course, every treatment program, every therapist is trauma informed. All that means is that you recognize from some basic standpoint that the individual that you're talking to has experienced either immediate or in their past some kind of traumatic episode. Like that is so ridiculous to me. It's like, of course, that could be my dog has experienced a trauma, you know what I mean? So but typically trauma focused organizations, they tend to be focused on like somatic experiencing. So that's like very much a trauma informed modality, things like EMDR, although there's a lot of controversy around EMDR, various forms of like talk and processing, process based therapy. They tend to operate, they'll have like just specialized trauma tracks. So and trauma specialists are quite frankly few and far between. They're kind of like OCD specialists, or there's lots of people that say they're trauma specialists, but a lot of it is in the certifications, and a lot of there's kind of a fight within the therapeutic world. Again, this is the difference between the industry and the profession, is that, people in the professional world really focus in on the certifications because it's just another level of training that you have to
Yeah.
go through in order to like be like, okay, I'm certified and I can work and focus on this. And some of them are quite rigorous, and they're also there's a financial component to it. So there's a level of commitment that people are just paying to kind of do this. So it's always a breath of fresh air for me when I'm talking to a therapist and I'm like, "Oh, you do DBT, or you're like trauma, this and that." And if they're like, "Oh yeah, and I'm certified in, this modality or that modality or whatever," for me, that's always like, "Oh, okay, this person probably knows what they're talking about." You know what I mean? Because that means that and then I ask them like, "Oh, when did they do that?" Because it's kind of like, "Yeah, I'm a legal driver." "Oh, you got your driver's license yesterday. I think I want a new Uber driver." You know what I mean? Whereas, it's like, yeah, I'm a trauma informed therapist and I've been practicing for like 5 years. And you're like, oh, okay. So this person's probably, seen some stuff. Other things I look for is where they worked before. So anyone that's come from like the VA, for instance, or any kind of like state or public mental health organization, they tend to be amazing because they get all of the training that you could possibly ever want and more. Whereas people that are like, oh, I came from this like private place and then I went to this other private place, they're probably not going to be as rigorous. Also, too, with therapists, it's kind of like doctors. What makes you a better doctor is dealing with like a bunch of really wild shit. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because you just get like practice at dealing with like all of these different presentations. It's very much the same with therapists, So people that are coming from the VA or like county hospitals or are like legitimate social workers, they're dealing with like everything and they're dealing with it a lot. So they become a lot. It's like expertise is just like anything. You just become comfortable dealing with that level of pathology or whatnot. So people that are kind of in the know, you can kind of feel them out a little bit because it's like, oh yeah, they know what's going on if you're in the industry. If you're not, then I definitely say like look at where they went to school, who they studied under, where they did their training and stuff, where they collected their licensing hours at, where they worked before. Like, it sounds a little therapists get a little threatened with me sometimes because they're like, "Oh my God, am I being interviewed?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, you kind of are,
Yeah.
you know." 'Cause it's a very important relationship, therapeutic relationship. It's probably one of the most important relationships that you'll ever have with somebody. So it's important that, I think that they know what they're doing and they should be vetted correctly.
In my opinion, especially if you have the luxury of like picking out of sometimes your health insurance is like, no, we only cover this one. But especially if you have the luxury of picking, it should be an interview. You are interviewing them and you're hiring them for a job also. If you're not happy with them, like you should interview more and find a different one. It's okay. It's okay to do that. And they shouldn't be super offended by that either. So,
No, and I mean, most platforms now allow for variety. So that
yeah.
is one of the nicer things about BetterHelp and platforms like that. I'm not saying that they're raising the bar on mental health at all, but they are making it just more accessible to people who
Right.
are in kind of rural areas or that maybe don't have as many options as before.
What gives you hope right now when it comes to protecting and supporting vulnerable youth?
Really, survivor stories, things like this. There's a real movement and a real community that's been developed or being developed, and it's really quite refreshing. I think and there are, the more mainstream it's gotten, it's also as annoying as it has been in a lot of ways. It's also kind of helped it because it does just start shining a light on a lot of these things, and people are taking it a lot more seriously now. And it should. It's a very serious thing, and it's a very serious profession, and it's a very honorable profession, and it should be taken much more seriously.
Bite Mark sent this question ahead of time. She would like to know, what is your favorite poem?
Uh, It's a T.S. Eliot poem called "Little Gidding" from the Four Seasons.
Okay.
Four
I'll have to.
quartets. I
I'm
think
not
it's four
super
quartets.
familiar with that one. I'll have to look that one up. Oh, yeah, from Four Quartets. Yep. Yep.
Yeah, Four Quartets, not Four Seasons. Sorry, that's a hotel.
And a show, I think, as well.
Isn't everything a show these days?
Yes, yeah, pretty much. Pretty much it is. I was trying to look it up real quick, but does it this actually? I'll have to find the full one of it so I can give it a little read. What is your favorite life hack?
Oh my god, I don't know if I have any life hacks for people. My favorite life hack, doubling up on pet medication. That's always I have 2 dogs, so it's like if one gets sick, whenever I go to the vet, I'm just like, "Can you just please give me the double dosage for this? Because I know it's gonna happen to the
Yep.
other one." I imagine that would be pretty, convenient for kids as well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But a doctor's not going to do that. Well, no, that's not
Yeah.
true because a couple of times actually. One time I got the flu, or one time my son when he was a baby, he got the flu, and I was able to just because his pediatrician was like, "Yes, he has the flu. Here's the medication." I called my doctor. I was like, "My kid has the flu. I'm starting to feel icky." My doctor was like, "Do not come in. Here you go." And so
Yeah, yeah.
that worked out. And then whenever I got COVID, it was very easy to just call my kids' doctors and be like, I've got COVID. And they were just like, great, here, have some stuff for the whole family. And they prescribed a bunch
There
of
you go, yeah.
Paxlovid, which we wound up not needing, but it was still good.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, Paxlovid for everyone. That sounds
Yeah,
great.
yeah. Which I hate that stuff. It doesn't do this for everyone, but it made everything taste so terrible for me, which
I've heard that from multiple people actually, that it, like,
yeah, it was
uh,
awful. It was so bad, so
it kind
bad.
of ruined their food for them for, like, a little while.
Yeah, everything tasted like pennies with some sort of bitter stuff on it. It was gross. The only thing that helped was just constantly having a Red Hot in my mouth, the little Red Hot candies. That's the only
Oh,
thing
yeah,
that would
yeah.
cover the taste. That was it.
I mean, peanuts make everything better anyway,
It's
so
true. It's true.
they're good
Well,
candies. They're duck candy.
we are coming up on the magic moment of the stream. So, folks who have been here, if you have any more questions for Corey, feel free to pop them into the chat. We'll make sure to get them addressed. But let me turn on my magic wand. Corey, if you could eliminate one common opinion or misconception or theory around mental health or disabilities or talking about mental illness, what would it be?
Is that you can microwave yourself out of a mental health crisis.
Yeah.
That's just that does I would love for it to exist. That would be really fantastic, but there, all of these like wonder drugs or wonder this or wonder that or whatever. There's a great book by he's not a healthcare practitioner, but the premise stands. But there's a Buddhist gentleman named Jack Kornfield that wrote a fantastic book called After the Ecstasy of the Laundry. I think that healthcare and mental health care generally, we need to stop thinking about it in terms of these like quick fix things and more of like, it's like brushing your teeth, You don't see the benefit of doing it because you do it every day, but as soon as you stop doing it, you start noticing.
Yeah. I like it when you said that earlier, that there's no way to microwave yourself out of like a crisis. There's just not a shortcut. There's not a shortcut to it. There's things that could dull it. There's things that could distract you, but working through it takes work. And that's what it is. But yeah, yep, that's a good one. Well, I'm going
Sadly, our
to
brain is not developed as fast as our technology has.
yeah, really is a bummer. I'm going to post your links one more time. So if folks are looking to connect with you, they can find your book, your LinkedIn, your website. While I do that, I will just open up the floor to you. If there's anything we didn't cover, anything you want to throw out there as far as resources, feel free to do that.
No, I just really appreciate being on the show, and thanks so much. This was a lot of fun, and I hope everyone that's listening enjoyed it. And please check out Selling Sanity. It's available on Amazon.
Well, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you just taking the time and sharing your story with us.
Thank you so much. It's a real pleasure.
That was Dr. Corey Jentry talking about the troubled teen industry and his journey from survivor to advocate. There's a lot to sit with from that conversation. The idea that these programs exist at all is disturbing enough. But what really gets me is how they survive by exploiting the exact moment when families are most vulnerable. When parents are terrified and don't know what else to do, that's when these facilities swoop in with promises they can't keep. And I think that applies beyond just the troubled teen industry. There are a lot of industries built on selling certainty to people in crisis. Quick fixes, magic solutions, just hand over your money and your trust and everything will be fine. Whether it's mental health treatment or addiction recovery or any other area where people are desperate for help, there are always going to be people ready to profit from that desperation. What Corey said about mental health not being something you can microwave really stuck with me. We live in a world that wants everything fast. Fast food, fast shipping, fast results. But healing doesn't work that way. Neither does recovery. You can't skip the hard parts just because they're uncomfortable or slow. I also appreciated his honesty about why he got involved in advocacy work. He didn't have some noble calling. He got angry. And sometimes anger is exactly what you need to actually do something instead of just accepting the way things are. There's nothing wrong with being pissed off about injustice. That's often where real change starts. If you are a parent listening to this and you're worried about your kid, I hope the takeaway isn't that you should never seek help. It's that you need to ask the hard questions. Look past the marketing. You need to know what red flags to watch for. And you need to understand that if something sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And if you're someone who went through one of these programs or any kind of treatment that did more harm than good, I hope you know that your experience and your story matter. And there are people out there working to make sure fewer kids have to go through what you went through. If you want to learn more about Corey's work, connect with him, or pick up his book, Selling Sanity, I've got links in the show notes and on tacosfallapart.com. Before I let you go, if you found this conversation valuable, I'd really appreciate it if you would take a minute to rate and review the show. It really makes a difference in helping other people find these episodes. And if you're not already subscribed, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss future conversations. We tackle a lot of different topics on this show: mental health, disability, lived experience, systemic problems that don't get enough attention. All of it comes back to the same idea. Real stories matter. Struggles are part of being human, and there's hope even when things are messy. Thanks for listening today and for being part of this community. Remember, we're all just trying to hold it together out here, and sometimes that means accepting that even tacos fall apart. I'll catch you next time.